Hello and welcome back into the Mist. My name is Locke, my pronouns are they, he, and I will be your wereraven today. Now, as I guide you into the mist, we're getting pretty close to the holiday of love, Valentine's Day. So what better topic to discuss together than some canonical Curse of Strahd ships? Well, I guess if they're canonical, they're kind of not ships. They just are established in the module and talking a bit more of how to include and show romance in a gothic horror setting. And then as well as some not so canonical ships that I'm going to pitch you to include and you may see in various different campaigns depending on, what goes down in yours. But before we get into the fun stuff, we do need to talk about something serious happening in the real world. I want to talk about Minneapolis. There is a great danger about our rights in what has been happening in Minneapolis. And honestly, all of us need to be speaking out and supporting them and doing what we can now. There are essentially a masked army going around and kidnapping and executing people in the street. This can't be allowed to be our norm. It can't. I'm going to provide some links in the description below for 5 calls or that basically gives you a script to either call or email your representatives about what's happening, as well as some resources to help Minneapolis in particular right now. So please, if you can, check those out in the description below. So many of the stories that we tell in Curse of Strahd, Barovia, or the rest of Ravenloft are so based in fighting back against fascism and tyranny and oppression and seeing the horrors of what those horrific establishments can put onto people, coming together as a community, as a party to rise against and help NPCs in the community and fight back against that it would be a shame if those of us who enjoy this setting so much now didn't stand up in real life. I think you've missed the point of Ravenloft and so often just D&D and tabletop RPGs in general, the stories that we weave together. If you can support it and do it in fiction, you can do it in real life. Alright, well, after you hopefully check out those resources, you've come back here and we can get on to some of the fun, silly ship stuff for our video today. So we might as well start with our canonical couples, or polycules, as I'm going to start with at the beginning. So we gotta start with the obvious, which is Count Strahd von Zarevich, Ludmilla, Anastasia, and Valenta, and I guess I'll throw in Escher, because he's technically also there. The polycule, the royal polycule. I guess the noble polycule. Strahd's got royal blood in his, coagulated. I almost said running in his veins, but I guess it would technically probably be coagulated. I don't want to think about that anymore. Let's just focus on the ship. So we have Strahd and his brides, right? And I've already made a video about the brides and how you can utilize them more, make them more fully fleshed out people. I'll put a little card here if you want to go check that out as well. So definitely do that. Involve them more, because the more that the polycule is involved, the more I think your party will connect with the BBEG and also what he's done to people, especially like in a romantic sense, because depending on how you decide to write the bride's characters, some of them could be there willingly, some of them might be just making do with what they have, some of them might have been doing a little power grab, and then obviously some of them might have been kind of married against their will, charmed and changed, and the party could potentially see their future fates in the brides if any of them start to become enamored with Strahd himself. It also does a good job of showing what Irina's fate could be if you fail to protect her. But outside of the lessons that seeing Strahd's polycule could, help the party see, I would also argue that you could show Strahd's soft side for his brides, that maybe he's not entirely terrible to them. But obviously, he's probably not the. I would not say that Strahd's a good partner in any regard. So you will get to see a bit of his more manipulative and abusive side with how he would treat his wives. And that could be very insightful as well, of seeing that sort of romance with him and what you're getting with that. I also just really love the idea of, even though Strahd's like an asshole and he's kind of at the center of this polycule, that the brides all got each other's backs and they're like fully in love and support each other. As catty as things probably get from time to time, mainly stemmed from Strahd being the problem. Alright, our next couple of canonical couples are going to take us to the town of Vallaki, actually. So obviously we have to start with the burgomaster slash baron, Vargas Vlahovic, and his wife, the Baroness Lydia Petrovna. They are usually the current leaders of Vallaki. You probably interact with them at least a little bit with the festivals and seeing how, well, the town that's pitched to be the most safe because they have walls and it's the largest population, and their festivals keep the devil at bay, maybe isn't quite as safe as it seems, and a lot of that has to do with their kind of backwards, insane outlook on life that they argue has to be the right way because they're nobles, of course. And then, of course, they have their son, Victor Vlahovic, who's supposed to inherit the burgomaster title once his father either dies or steps down. Now, obviously, the module doesn't give you a lot to go off of, but I think there's a lot of fun to be had in exploring what their marriage actually is like. So Vargas, we know, is pretty like set in his ways. He thinks that the festivals really do help the people. Don't be caught frowning. He'll throw you in the stocks or have Ezek do it for him. I feel like you could definitely interpret him as he wants things exactly his way in the house. You could see that in the way that he acts publicly and will have his family act publicly. Whereas Lydia I actually think is the more interesting out of the two of them, because Lydia Petrovna is the sister of Father Lucian Petrovich, I believe is his last name, who is the leader of the church in town, and they are descendants of a saint or great healer of the Morning Lord. I can't remember her name right now. Almost want to say it's Tasha, but I could so be wrong. Lydia finds great pride in that. So she is a devout follower of the Morning Lord and involved with the church. So she is keeping up these pretenses with what her husband wants for the town, but she also has a faith and duty to enact, the faith of the dawn to help the community. So you have this fun way to twist of she's playing this role, this expectation of being the perfect wife, but things are probably not all that good back at home. Victor is hard to get along with. He's a recluse and shuts himself in and is a disappointment to his father, right? So getting to play with how much love is in that marriage. It's definitely might have been like a just political marriage. Maybe there was love once and it was lost, but it's definitely one that you can show how people do things for survival in Barovia rather than actually for any sort of emotion or want. It really shows the kind of coldness, even though like they're nobles and have more money and more prospects and resources, that even they can't escape the idea of doing things that they just have to get by. But that takes us to our other Vallaki couple who is in a loving marriage. And of course, I'm talking about Erwin Mardukov and Danica Dorokova, the couple that runs the Blue Water Inn, who have two young boys, Bram and Bray Mardukova, which I only found out recently their last name is technically Mardukova because they combined both of the parents' last names, and the naming conventions are not consistent in Barovia, and it's fine, doesn't bother me at all. But yes, not only are Erwin and Danica kind of bastions of the community of actual light and goodness and helping people, far and wide, not just in Vallaki, but probably a bit more concentrated in Vallaki. They secretly do good, in the shadows of the night when people aren't really paying attention because, there's still that self-preservation of if something happens to them, obviously, well, they don't want anything to happen to their loved ones, but also if they fall, the community loses that, like, really good source of gathering and food and wine and merriment that they need to actually get through this dreary existence. So not only are they that, but they are probably the best example of a healthy relationship in Barovia. I would love for someone to give me another ship in the comments below to prove me wrong, but out of the canon characters, I would argue that Erwin and Danica have the most healthy relationship that we get to see throughout the whole Curse of Strahd campaign. They truly care about each other, they're loving, they've been together for so many years, they are truly a team in how they operate the inn and then their secret, like, rebellion stuff they got going on. They are peak. They are beautiful, and if anything ever happens to those two, I do judge the groups that let things happen to the Mardikovs. They're so cute and so nice and helpful and really, like, some of the best allies that a party can have. So you really get to explore what happens when people use the power of love and community to fuel themselves to be a resistance with them. And also get to show the strength in still finding love and care despite how frightening and vulnerable that can make you. And instead of seeing it as a vulnerability, that it's a strength within them. I really like that too. Alright, our next canon couple, we have to go to Vladimir Horngard and Sir Godfrey Gwilym. These are our undead tragic gays. So to keep things brief, Vladimir and Godfrey were knights of the Silver Order that served the Silver Dragon Argynvost before he fell in trying to protect the valley before Barovia technically formed. And Vladimir was so angry at the loss of his lover Godfrey and Argynvost that his anger created all of the revenants of the Silver Order, and they are doomed to forever return in their anger and rage and need for vengeance against Strahd until they succeed in doing so. And that hatred and rage has essentially monsterized and completely changed who Vladimir is as a person. I mean, imagine centuries of only thinking about your vengeance and how that would alter you. And constantly coming back in dead body, and also being a form of undead. And now your enemy is also undead, how much you would also hate yourself. To where, in present day, Vladimir and Godfrey's relationship isn't too hot right now. They're very probably estranged, but they obviously care for each other. A lot of the dynamics you can explore and play into is on Godfrey's side, him wanting to help kind of free Vladimir from this kind of isolation prison of hatred that he's got himself locked away in by either helping him complete the task or restoring the light of Barovia in Argynvost. And then on Vladimir's side, he's so determined to get the vengeance, and, you know, there's selfishness in it that he needs it for himself for the fact that he failed since he was, like, the leader of the Silver Order. Or, you know, behind the dragon, of course. But also, he's doing it for the members, the Knights of the Silver Order, especially Godfrey, who he witnessed die right in front of his eyes, right? So, if you can also help either restore the light of Barovia to where, like, some levity comes back to that particular part of Barovia, or help Vladimir get his vengeance, kind of play into, well, what's the relationship look like how strained is it while that's happening, but also in the aftermath, if you succeed, are they able to recover from centuries of being estranged and being different people? And how do they get back to themselves after all of that trauma and that mission's just gone and they're free to just be themselves again? If you decide to let them stay, because I believe revenants, when they get their vengeance, actually finally get to be put at rest. So also could argue that they would all just be gone, and we never truly get to see them reconcile. Alright, and last of our canonical couples, we're going all the way to Kresk, and we're going to talk about Baron Dmitry Kreskov and Baroness Anna Kreskov? I think she just has the same last name. I don't remember now. Crucify me. So moving all the way to Kresk, we get more paranoia in a relationship as well as a lot of grief. And all of that grief stems from the fact that Dimitri and Anna's kids have all had this mysterious illness that has gone through them and killed all of them except for the last youngest son, whose name is Ilya. And as written, I believe he's supposed to die like right before the party gets to Kresk, or you can change it to where it happens while they're there, and you get to, so on and so forth, see some stuff with the Abbot. But Ilya was their last chance to have an heir. They're getting older, they're not going to have any more children, and they are a noble bloodline who descended from, the Kreskites that established that particular settlement so far away from the castle, and is for the most part kind of thrived by, not truly needing to leave town, and kind of self-sufficient in the way that they have trees and livestock and all that sort of thing within their own community, that like to have that fall and them be the last ones and to fail all their ancestors would be a tragedy, right? At least in their eyes. So you get to see, I would say, another strained marriage, a fallen house, or one that's on the brink of falling, and why they are, despite how paranoid and more anxious that Kreskites just are in general, that they let something. I'm trying to be vague because I'm giving a lot of spoilers in this video, but I'm trying to not give all of the spoilers. But they allow something that you could argue is rather horrible to try to keep their bloodline going so that they don't lose that. And what does that mean? How do people come to that decision? How good could their marriage truly be? Is there love there, or is it just purely about we need this bloodline to continue? And we need to keep leading our people in this particular way because this has worked out for us so far. Another marriage of survival, which is, I guess we're seeing mostly what romances are in Barovia, but I don't know, what were you expecting? Hey, editing lock here. I forgot to point out a very important part about this particular canonical ship, which is that most marriages struggle, if not fail, because of the loss of a child, and Dimitri and Anna lost multiple children, potentially all of them, depending on the fate of Ilya. So that is another grief-related topic that can be touched on with this couple throughout your Curse of Strahd campaign. Alright, I'm out. Okay, we've gotten all the canonical shit out of the way, so now I need to pitch to you some Curse of Strahd ships that you didn't know you needed. And I would like to start us off on a bit of a lighter note, just to shake it up a little bit, but also to include the youth of Barovia, because, we have YA stories, most of us had our first crushes as, like, single-digit ages or as teenagers, tweens, and I think it's important to showcase that sort of lighthearted, cute childhood crush era and how that might be affected by the way of the world of, perhaps it gets a little bit more serious at a younger age because of the fact that people die so often, either, disease, stupidity, or the oppression of the world with all the wolves and the wilderness and everything's awful, that people probably get married a lot younger, and your first childhood crush, if they like you back, might end up being the love of your life that you commit to, whether it ends up being a good thing in the long run or not. So let me tell you about my favorite younger generation of Barovia ship that I usually tend to include. And that is, of course, Bray Martikov and Arabelle from the Vistani camp just outside of Vallaki. So obviously, depending on how old you make the kids, will vary on how much you might actually include these details. I have several campaigns going to where, like, some of them they are very young and they're just childhood best friends, and people kind of tease them the way, people do in real life, of like, oh, that's your little girlfriend, that's your boyfriend, but they're mostly just best friends that just kind of get embarrassed and frustrated by the adults in their lives. Whereas I have some campaigns where they are teenagers and they are experiencing trying to navigate their first crush. Obviously, keep in mind that it depends on how old you want these kids to be. But like I was already saying, I just think it kind of makes sense because they're roughly implied to be about the same age, based in the module, and they are close enough by that they could know each other. And I just, again, think it would be cute to show what young love looks like in Barovia. how does that fight against the darkness? And do tweens actually let themselves have crushes? Is it harder for them to admit when they have feelings because at any moment you could lose that person? Or does it make it more of a emboldened state of feeling when you're that young and emotions are a bit more all over the place, and you feel things so deeply that you have to declare it for fear that yes, yeah, they could be gone at any moment. It's also like a nice change of pace because all of the canonical ships, they are all adults, and most of them are pretty dreary, as you can obviously see from me talking about them, to where this could be one that is a symbol of hope, that young people are still falling in love and getting together and pursuing each other despite it all, and could be a marker of the party changing Barovia for the better. Like, I think that's such an important thing, that as the party progresses, to show things in the world through either the people, the environment, what have you, that they are doing something that is actually making a difference, and something you can do is show that young people are falling in love again, that they are actively willing to pursue each other because they see themselves having a future because the party's changing Barovia for the better. Alright, for our second non-canonical ship I'm going to try to pitch you on, we're going to stay in Vallaki again. We're going to talk about Lord Vasily von Holtz and Lady Fiona Wachter. So let's start with Lady Wachter. So Lady Wachter has, a questionable meeting at her house, whether you want to call it a book club or what have you. But she has some interesting ties and opinions on the ruler of this land. And the history of her family line, if you've read Strahd essentially, establishes why she feels that way and why she has certain loyalties to the castle. Now, these are obviously not necessarily directly claimed. That's why she petitions and protests against Baron Vargas's rule, trying to, make a vie for power to kind of shift things in Vallaki more towards Strahd's favor. I could argue that, if you really want to play into that, Lord Vasily von Holtz is a guise that Strahd uses. He could definitely be, offering Fiona romantic propositions in exchange for further loyalties, really playing that card of keeping her in check. It would definitely be a probably secretive but very manipulative romantic relationship if you wanted to include that, but would further Lady Wachter's devotion to Strahd, especially if he decides to entrust her with his secret disguise that he can use to keep an eye on the people a bit more closely without them immediately being in fear of their lives. So I think it's an interesting dynamic to play with, of the nobility in Vallaki and giving Lady Fiona a relationship, making her seem more desirable than I think some people make Lady Fiona seem. It also potentially gives Vasily a more active role if the party gets really involved with what's going on in Vallaki. My third pitch has to be Esmeralda Dievnir and Irina Koliana. We gotta get a lesbian ship in here. So this is one that I think might be a bit more dependent on how you either want to set up your campaign or how your campaign plays out, because depending on if you want to go with where you meet characters canonically, they could be on opposite ends of the map. So it takes a lot for technically them to meet if you don't want them to already have a pre-established relationship. But I just really like the idea of this Vistani monster hunter who believes a bit more in like the good of things than her mentor does, and the ability to leave room for gray areas, than to meet Irina, who is currently in the process of being turned by Strahd. The protectiveness that Ez would feel over Irina, and Irina feeling loved and cherished, what she would do for Ez. I just think that they would be a very good example of what love can do to strengthen people, but also could go into some toxicity in what they'd be willing to do for each other without probably communicating with the other. Because they're both very powerful, vocal women, and I think they would be a powerhouse couple, but also would have potentially a lot of issues with communication. It's me again. I forgot to say the cutest part of Irina and Ez getting together, and that is the fact that Ez can leave the mist and bring back little gifts and particularly new foods to Irina for her to try. I just have always loved the aspect of Irina getting to try like sweets or spicy foods and like all those different flavors that you wouldn't get in a sunless world. And I've just I've somehow always ended up with her being a foodie based on dice rolls, that she always like really loves really big bold flavors and has a huge sweet tooth. So the idea of as being able to bring her gifts that she absolutely can't get from anyone else is also very cute and sweet. And as like maybe diligently keeping track of what Irina really likes and like where exactly she got it from these outside worlds that Ez could technically go to. But then that also leans into the potential clinginess that could unfold with this, because yes, Ez could go out and bring Irina back so many things that would be new experiences for her. But there's always a chance that Ez would never actually make it back home. And Irina, maybe after finally feeling loved and cherished, after being stalked by Strahd, might have a harder time letting that go, letting her go in the event that Ez doesn't return. So, that's the cute shit of that ship that I didn't say. I don't know why. Alright, I'm out again. This is not a couple that I've personally explored. Unfortunately, Esmeralda has always been kind of ignored by parties, and I'm hoping those of my tables that have not met her yet, that will not be the same case. But I would love for, if someone doesn't romance Irina for once, for Ez and Irina to get together. I just think they would be super cute together, and also would get to show a different sort of relationship than any of the other ones I've pitched so far. You know, since we're already in the village of Barovia, kind of, with that ship, the next ship we should just go ahead and stay here. Let's go ahead and get into this more tragic, sad, despondent relationship ship I wanna throw at you, and that is Doru and Ismark Kolyanovich. Now, Ismark the Lesser is a man who drowns his sorrows in wine and doesn't exactly have the best reputation in the village, despite the fact that canonically, when you meet him, he's just become the burgomaster of the village. So a rather sad man. It takes a lot to get some motivation out of. He does want to do his best to serve his people and to bring about safety and prosperity as a leader, but he has so many faults and anxieties and bad habits that it kind of prevents him from doing so, right? And you can feed into one of the reasons why he thinks he's not good enough that the party can help him work through so that he becomes a good leader and has a bit more of a optimistic personality in the end, is with Doru. Doru, who you usually find him when you go to the church because something's wrong with the church. And Doru had left a year ago to join a siege on the castle and came back changed. Changed and hungry. And if Ismark and Doru were in a romantic relationship before that happened, and Ismark begged Doru not to go and told him what a bad idea it was, and didn't do enough to stop him, and then found out that Doru came back changed and starving, and Ismark took that upon himself of carrying that guilt of feeling like it was him who could have prevented it, that could feed into the self-esteem and confidence issues that Ismark has when you meet him. Also, who doesn't love a bit of tragedy? A bit of gay tragedy. It's also something that kind of fleshes out Doru as a character, because really outside of, like, what happened to him that made him the monster he is when you find him, we don't get anything else about him. It gives him more of a history in the town where you might sympathize with him more, to where instead of just immediately killing him, you might try to help him instead, which then could lead to a better reputation with Father Donovich, as well as the village of Barovia, and might give you a little, like, you know, foot in the door with Ismark outside of with Irina. I don't know, that's something I've technically included in all of my runs, but no one's ever asked Ismark about himself. So no one's fucking known that he was in love with, or could potentially still be, depending on what happens with what the party does with Doru. No one's ever found that out. So hi, players that I know are gonna watch this despite the spoiler warning at the beginning. Ismark's a little gay. Okay, my last ship that I'm pitching to you is something that you need in your campaign. Is technically kind of my most hear me out ship. okay? So just stay with me. Stay with me. This is kind of for our monster fuckers. I'm looking at you. You see me? We're gonna be on the same page. Okay. The Abbot and Vasilka. Before anyone runs to the comments, I will also say that this is a ship that I would not include unless it was a run I was doing where the Abbot has been working on Vasilka for much longer than is written in the module. The Abbot is immortal, as we know, and very strategic and a little bit insane, but very, very sure of his plan working. I could see that being interpreted as he made Vasilka like 75 years ago and has been teaching her to speak, how to carry herself as nobility, researching who Tatiana, the lost love of Strahd, was, and trying to mold her personality by that for years upon years upon years. You could play with a storyline of if Vasilka is given her own soul, she becomes her own person, and the longer she has to form her own opinions and thoughts, the more she's not going to want to be this picturesque imitation of someone she's not. And the fight back and the call to the Abbot to recognize what he's doing is maybe not so in the light of the Morning Lord. I just think there's a lot of fun nuance to play there of this new being discovering who they are that's also going to live forever, a Frankenstein-esque creature, if you will, and having to come to terms with what they were made for and not wanting that destiny for herself. Whereas the Abbot thinks that, like, this has to be the plan that brings the Dawn back to Barovia and sets it free, but he now cares for her as a person rather than just a chess piece in his plan. I always really like the idea of the Abbot being more nuanced than just being kind of crazy, and using a romantic relationship could be how you show that he will do crazy things for the ones he cares about the most, and the struggle of Vasilka becoming that to him is just very intriguing to me. And then I know I said that this was like our potential monster fucker ship. Well, the Abbot is an angel, and I know a lot of us, since he's kind of like a fallen angel, likes to use his true form as a very corrupt, fucked up version of like a biblically accurate angel. So we got that monster there. And then obviously we have Frankenstein-esque Vasilka, who is supposed to look as close to Tatiana/Irina as possible, but technically you could make her a bit more monstrous of when he was a bit more crazed in forming her, gave her extra limbs, or I've seen her as like a complete like flesh monster. Basically not humanoid looking at all. So you could really play with what she technically looks like if you would, if you want to go that route. But either way, they're both like immortals. One on the celestial end, one more on the undead end, which also plays into like the we don't belong together, but our feelings have formed type of forbidden relationship that you can show throughout that non-canonical ship. And obviously there is something to be said with the parallels between the Abbot and Strahd, of they're both powerful men, top of a mountain, that are worshipped and have servants that follow them. And if you wanted to really lean into the parallels, instead of having it a mutually reciprocated relationship, you could have Vasilka parallel Irina in that the Abbot really romantically wants her, and because of the reason why she was made and why she was kept imprisoned and all of that, she wants nothing to do with him and is actively trying to escape him, or maybe has. And the Abbot is pursuing her to parallel the way that Strahd is pursuing Irina. So you could also lean into it that way of having just another blaring parallel between the angel and the devil of Barovia. Alright, and that is it for all of the ships I have to present to you, either canonically or that I think you need in your life. Let me know what you think about any of these in the comments below, and if there's any ships that you are a big fan of out of the NPCs in the Curse of Strahd module, I would also love to hear about those as well. Now, before we get on out of the mist today, I just want to remind you guys about the resources I mentioned that are in the description below. Please check those out at some point if you haven't already, and try to support and give what you can to communities being impacted, as well as supporting your own. Let's protect our neighbors, as well as As I guide you out of the mist, I want to wish you all a very happy Valentine's Day. I hope you get to celebrate with your loved and cherished ones in whatever way that means for you. And I hope these ship ideas or expansions on established ones help you run romance in the different various forms it comes in Barovia a little bit better at your own tables. If you like this video, please subscribe. That helps me out greatly. I do make a lot of Ravenloft resource related content, so if that's what you're into, you're gonna want to see more. So go ahead and subscribe, hit the like button if you liked it. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.